Well, to date, the death toll from COVID-19 in Australia is low by world standards, attributed in great part to the federal government's decision to close our international borders some months ago. But of course, the health aspect is just one element of this virus's impact. The other impact is very much the economic toll, and that's now climbing well into the hundreds of billions of dollars in terms of job and business losses, welfare assistance, and of course, revenue falls for government, not to mention the national debt, which will exceed $1 trillion when the budget's finally brought down in October. A new report out tomorrow from the Menzies Research Centre raises grave concerns at the economic consequence of lockdowns, arguing that heavy-handed state restrictions could be killing our chance of a swift recovery, all the while including heavy costs to taxpayers. Executive Director for the Menzies Research Centre, Nick Cater, joins me now from Sydney. Nick Cater, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for your time. And this report is tremendous reading, worrying reading, I have to say. In your opinion, how long will it take for our economy to recover?
Well, I think it's going to take a generation or more. There's an indication, incidentally, in a report out last week by PricewaterhouseCoopers that said, you know, previously we were working on the assumption that we would get rid of our debt by 2030, at the end of this decade. They're now saying 2057, by which time the current treasurer will be 84. So, you know, clearly this burden is going to sit on the backs of future workers, some of whom haven't even been born. And this is one of the very important points the report makes. We need to look and focus on those long-term costs. It's all very well looking at the focusing on our budgets for the next few years, and the picture there is dire. But you can imagine, can't you? You know, you go into work at this, you know, if you went into work this year, you'd be in your late 50s before that debt was paid off, and you're having to deal with that, of course, in taxes. So there's huge, huge consequences right down the track in the foreseeable future.
Look, there's not a day goes by, Nick Cater, where there is not a call for some level of money from the government, state or federal, to be increased. The lion's share, of course, is coming out of the Commonwealth. There's calls to expand JobKeeper, to keep the double dole going beyond September, for special industry support for particular segments, aviation, transport, tourism. Those are often quoted. They even want childcare to continue to be subsidised, even though people are starting to get back to work and use it, or if they're not, can look after their children at home. They still want the taxpayer to pick up childcare. How does the government rein all of these requests in?
Well, that's, dare I say, its problem, but it has to do it. It has to do it very quickly, because what is happening right now is the cost of the lockdown and the associated measures is going up every day. It costs more and more every day to do it, and the benefit is less and less. The benefit now is a fraction of what it was early on, because we now know that the virus is less deadly, and also we know we have very good ways of controlling it. Although they seem to have broken down in one state, we know we can control it. But we're going to have to live in a world where we have to get people back to work, because in the end, the only solution to the problem you raised there, Peter, is to get wealth created. And the only way wealth is created is through getting people in productive jobs and getting capital invested back into businesses. The longer we delay that, the deeper this recession will be, the bigger the debt that will be remaining, and the longer the tail out of it. So we have to make some very hard decisions, I think, on the findings of our report very quickly.
One of the world's leading scientists, Paul Davies, says we've got to learn to live with it, treat it like spot fires that we put out, rather than doing what Victoria's done and locking down the entire state yet again. He's arguing we should treat it a bit like the flu. We may never get a vaccine, Nick Cater. How do we plan for this?
Well, for a start, we should be looking, I think, at a 3-year strategy of how we manage this economy if we don't get a vaccine or this thing doesn't suddenly disappear. Because I think the real message out of the Victorian outbreak is that the idea that we can eradicate this thing, as some states have been doing, as they tried to do in New Zealand, is just impossible. It's not going to happen. There will always be a degree of non-compliance. There will always be, some little residues there that'll pop up. You can't, no amount of policing, no amount of police overtime, No amount of, police standing outside McDonald's limiting the number of people that are going in is going to stop this virus. I promise you that. And therefore, this whole strategy that the Victorian government's looking at right now is completely the wrong direction. And what's more, when we modelled early on in this, what's the best scenario? Do we lock down hard? Do we not lock down? Or do we do a stop-start thing where we lock down every time there's a breakout? Well, of course, as you'd imagine, the worst of those models was, of course, the stop-start model, because business can't operate.
Which is where we've ended up.
With uncertainty.
Which is where we've ended up.
Of course.
Nick Cater, terrible reading. Well, good reading that you've done the work. Let's just hope more people get out there and take notice of it. But yeah, it's a very sobering report. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.